In 2007, a quiet woman from rural Ohio made a decision that stunned everyone around her. She adopted 6 orphan children from different parts of Africa, all at once. No one could understand why a single woman, with modest means and no fame, would take on such an overwhelming task. Some whispered behind closed doors. Others doubted she would survive a year. But what no one knew was that she carried a secret, a silent promise she had made long ago, to souls she hadn't even met yet. How did she change their lives, and how did they change hers? And most importantly, where are they now, nearly 2 decades later? The truth will surprise you, maybe even move you to tears. Hit like, subscribe and let's go. Before the world knew her name, Evelyn Carter lived a quiet, almost invisible life in a small town just outside Dayton, Ohio. Her days were simple, working mornings at the local library, sipping black coffee at the same corner cafe every afternoon, and spending her evenings lost in thick novels about distant lands and faraway lives. Her neighbors knew her as kind but reserved, always offering a warm smile but rarely inviting anyone too close. On Sundays, she volunteered at the local church, arranging flowers no one noticed. It was a life many would call peaceful, yet beneath that calm surface, something stirred. Evelyn often stared out of her window longer than necessary, her heart restless, as if waiting for a sign, or a calling. And soon, that calling would come, louder and more urgent than she ever could have imagined. One rainy afternoon in late October 2007, Evelyn's life cracked open in the most unexpected way. A tattered flyer, soaked and barely clinging to a telephone pole, caught her eye as she hurried home. It wasn't the usual lost pet or garage sale announcement. Instead, it was a black and white photograph of 6 solemn faces, 6 children, with a simple, haunting message: they need a home. Evelyn froze, heart pounding harder than the rain. Something in their eyes, something raw and pleading, reached into her soul and refused to let go. She tore the flyer free, her fingers trembling. That night, sleep abandoned her. Why had this found her? Why now? Deep down, she knew this was no coincidence. It was a beginning, of something she could not yet understand. And the true storm was still gathering beyond the horizon. Over the next few days, the strange signs multiplied. Evelyn began noticing the same 6 faces, in dreams, in fleeting reflections, even among the worn pages of her library books. Once, as she stacked returned novels, a picture book fell open on its own, revealing a story about orphan children crossing oceans in search of hope. The coincidences piled up until they no longer felt like coincidences at all. Her chest tightened with a feeling she couldn't explain, a mixture of fear, awe, and inevitability. Evelyn started avoiding the cafe, skipping church, isolating herself, as if trying to run from an invisible force pulling her closer. Every night, she hid the flyer in a drawer, and every morning, it lay waiting on her kitchen table. Untouched. Unexplained. The message was clear, but was she brave enough to listen? One evening, unable to bear the silence any longer, Evelyn searched for the organization listed on the tattered flyer. To her surprise, the agency didn't appear in any official records, no address, no website, no trace. But then, an anonymous email arrived in her inbox, a single line, no signature: "If you're ready, come to 417 Maple Lane. Midnight." Against all reason, against every instinct of fear, Evelyn drove through the dark, misty streets to the abandoned house at the edge of town. There, an elderly woman waited, her silver hair glowing under the porch light, her eyes filled with knowing sorrow. In her frail hands, she held a small, worn leather journal. "Their stories," she whispered, pressing it into Evelyn's palms. At that moment, Evelyn realized, this was no ordinary call to kindness. It was something far, far deeper, and far more dangerous. Back home, Evelyn opened the leather journal with trembling hands. Inside were photographs, real, raw, heartbreaking, of the 6 children. Pages detailed their lives in broken shelters, refugee camps, and forgotten villages where hunger and violence were daily shadows. But as she turned each page, Evelyn's breath caught. Alongside their names and histories were scribbled dates that matched her own nightmares, her own restless nights months before. She realized, with a jolt of terror, that somehow, she had been connected to them long before finding that flyer. This was no random act of charity. It was destiny, or something even more unsettling. Overwhelmed by a crushing mix of fear and responsibility, Evelyn sank to the floor, clutching the journal to her chest. She had a choice: walk away and live with the weight of it forever, or step into a world she barely understood. Just as Evelyn made up her mind to act, a new shadow crept into her life. Late one night, a black car parked outside her home, engine running, headlights off. Anonymous letters began to arrive, warning her to leave it alone. Fear gnawed at her, but the journal's stories weighed heavier. She discovered that the children weren't just orphans, they were survivors of conflicts tied to powerful interests, people who wanted their pasts buried forever. By trying to save them, Evelyn wasn't just risking her peace, she was challenging something much darker. Standing at the edge of her porch, clutching the journal, she realized she couldn't protect herself and the children without stepping into the storm. One step forward would change everything. One step back would haunt her forever. And somewhere, 6 young souls were still waiting, without knowing if help would ever come. The night Evelyn finally arranged to meet the children's contact, everything unraveled. As she approached the meeting spot, an old railway station, flashing red and blue lights flooded the scene. She watched in horror as 2 figures were dragged into black vans, disappearing into the darkness. A trap. Someone had been watching her every move. Heart hammering, she fled into the woods, clutching the journal like a lifeline. Hours later, soaked and shivering, she realized her world had shattered. Whoever was behind this wasn't just trying to scare her, they were willing to destroy lives to keep their secrets. For the first time, doubt poisoned her mind. Maybe she wasn't strong enough, maybe she was foolish to believe one woman could fight this. But then, in the soft glow of dawn, she found it, a small photograph tucked deep in the journal. A new clue. A new chance. The photograph led Evelyn to an old mission house on the outskirts of town, a place abandoned by most but kept alive by a few brave souls. There, she met Samuel, a quiet, steady man who had once been part of the same shadowy network but had turned away in shame. Samuel had been waiting for someone like her, someone reckless enough to care. With his help, Evelyn pieced together safe routes, hidden allies, and forged documents. Together, they orchestrated the children's escape from the grasp of those who wanted them silenced. The final hours were frantic, heart-pounding, a breath away from disaster. But somehow, by faith, by sheer will, Evelyn succeeded. The 6 children were finally safe, their eyes no longer haunted but shining with fragile hope. Evelyn had not only saved them, she had saved a piece of herself. Today, nearly 18 years later, Evelyn's small home overflows with life, laughter, and photographs of 6 young adults who now chase dreams once thought impossible. Doctors, teachers, artists, each carrying scars of their past, but also the strength of a future Evelyn refused to let die. She no longer hides behind library books or coffee shop windows. She walks proudly, carrying the invisible weight of a choice that changed everything. And yet, sometimes, when the wind shifts just right, Evelyn still feels the presence of those dark nights, the whispers of what could have been. Would you have found the courage to act when the world warned you to stay silent? Would you step into the unknown for someone you hadn't even met yet? Hit like, subscribe, and tell us, what would your heart choose when everything is on the line?